Welcome to the International Student Podcast by Prodigy Finance, your one-stop shop for all things finance and study abroad. We're here to transform your future one financial step at a time. Join us as we dive into the world of student finance, career advice, and inspiring stories from our global community. Let's unlock your potential together. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Shreyas to the show. Shreyas Kushik is a graduate from Cranfield School of Management, and this episode is called The International Student Guide to Landing the Offer, where we discuss SOP, interview, and resume strategies. Let's dive in. Welcome to the show, Shreyas.
Thank you so much, Cindy. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And to give a little background about myself, I've spent the last 5 years in the field of executive life coaching, where I've helped professionals, especially the founders and CXOs, have a better understanding of work-life harmony while continuing with their day-to-day activities. And me being an international student myself, I've also had the absolute pleasure of helping students craft effective SOPs, prepare them for interviews, and in general, help them understand how the international life is going to be and get them set to understanding and unlocking their complete potential. So good to be here.
Thank you so much, Shreyas. Could you just tell us a little bit about your study abroad journey before we go into the beautiful SOP stuff? Can you give us a little bit of a background into your education and your master's and what course you studied and why you chose to study your master's?
Definitely. So my basic education is into mechanical engineering, and post completing my bachelor's, I had a brief 1-year work experience to just try and collect myself to understand the industry better, which is when I came across a particular course in Cranfield University, which was actually conducted by a professor almost for the last 40 years. And I was so excited to find that that particular professor was still teaching this course, which made me choose Cranfield as my destination to complete my master's in automotive engineering. So I studied from the period 2018 to 2019. And post that, I started to briefly work in my chosen field. And COVID just happened to make me shift and pivot towards something which was more reasonable to me, which is coaching, helping people. So that is how the journey started. And here we are 5-6 years later, trying to just do that on a continuous basis and hopefully get more students enjoy the particular experience and international exposure has to offer.
Great. What an interesting pivot from automotive engineering to coaching. We talk about SOPs. What exactly is an SOP, Shreyas?
Definitely. So SOP is something which even I struggled myself when I first started applying to universities. SOP stands for Statement of Purpose. It essentially is a tool for you to tell your story that connects to the admissions committee, apart from what you do either through education or your grades or your exams that you have taken. So it is essentially your chance to show the admissions committee why you are fit to take their programs. And coming to the SOP in particular, you can probably look at it as a bridge which links your academic persona on one side and your professional journey and your personal motivation on the other end. And this is particularly written to somebody who is not probably going to be technical. So there is a lot of differences that comes in when you probably write it in a technical manner compared to what you would probably write when you're doing it from an admission perspective, which is what I would want to focus on today. So a strong SOP can make all the difference because you would be definitely competing with amazing candidates from across the world. So it is not just about listing your achievements. Rather, it is about showing your passion, your purpose, and your potential to just put your candidature on top of everybody else and just say to the admissions committee that you are prepared to embrace this international opportunity. In my consulting with students, I have found there are certain key mistakes that any new student would probably make, which is they write the SOP very generic. So it is not specific to your field, or it is not specific to the particular potential that you want any admission committee member to understand. It could be like you're applying for a program. If I take my own example, I applied to the program of automotive engineering. So I took my SOP as an opportunity to share about things that I did which went beyond my academic excellence. So my grades were always on the top. So it was very much clear that my entry requirements were met. So I just took it to show some of my extracurricular activities that I had participated in, which was me creating my college's own go-kart club, wherein we built go-karts, we designed it, we started racing in championships, and we also won quite a few championships. So that was
That
a
is
particularly good
awesome.
place. It indeed was. It was very exciting, and it really shows up my potential, my interest, and why I would make a good candidate. And the second mistake that I've seen students make is they focus too much on the technical aspects. As I said earlier, the admissions committee might not be technical at all. So you would probably be telling to somebody who is just having an office job. So they would be only tasked to filter out these generic SOPs. So it isn't really in good taste to be very technical. And the third mistake students do is they start putting out jargons. Again, since the admission committee member is not likely to be technical, they might not understand what are certain terms that you're referring to, or sometimes it doesn't even make sense for them to know that you understand all these technical terms, because it was the duty of either the course director, as in my case, to get you on an interview and check your credentials for technical perception. And lastly, the use of very complex language. I understand we would, as students, you're most likely to be excited to, use all sort of fancy terms, make it as good as any other author would write.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't be the case here, because, as I said, the admissions committee would only have a few minutes to go through each of the SOPs. And the simpler you make it, the better you're going to land. All they need to check is, do you have the potential? Do you have the interest? And what are the other specific achievements you have done outside of your academic experience? So these are some things which make SOPs really better.
This is so interesting because you want to be really impressive to who's ever reviewing it. So you think that you add all this fancy jargon and you really use all these big words. But what you're saying is to keep it basic, to keep it authentic, and to also just include information like your hobbies, etc.
Absolutely. Yes. Keep it simple. Keep it, I wouldn't say stupid, but keep it just as simple as possible, trying to put out your persona, because we are not there to evaluate your command over the English language. We do not want to understand how good of a technical person you are just at that point, because there's always going to be one interview that happens where you can probably exhibit all your technical knowledge. In this context, the SOP has to be just a one-page, simple, crisp, to the point explanation of what motivates you, what is the potential you have, and why that particular university is going to be apt for you to decide. So that is all they want to see. It is more or less asking you for the motivation and also the reasoning behind selecting that particular university, because there is, just like a university has a lot of candidates to choose from, even as a candidate, I would have access to a lot of different universities to choose from. So they would want to understand what makes them that special. So what is the connection that we as students are looking to make? So that is what is going to land you the next round. And so just keeping it simple, share your story, because if you start sharing what really motivates you. So for example, in my opinion, in my case, my work with the go-kart club proved to be a major point, because they know that I'm having a story which I want to build upon and probably enter that particular segment. So that is all you need to do. Just keep it simple. You don't have to be too fancy. Don't be too technical, and just give it your best shot.
What is your advice about the use of AI, such as ChatGPT and Gemini, when writing your SOP?
interesting take, actually, because many people do often use AI, but in my opinion, I would say it is not going to replace you because your story is yours. It's very unique. There isn't anybody else that can craft your story the best other than you. So it is also evident because these admission committee members are probably going to be doing this for many, many years. They're all experienced. They know how to catch certain phrases. They know which words are most likely to be AI generated because the SOP has to be a conversation, whereas an AI cannot be as conversational as a human would because it cannot understand your particular voice. Or probably if you're very tech savvy and you have your own model trained, perhaps yes. So, in my opinion, I would say use AI just to give you a basic rundown of what are good practices to write an SOP, but I would still suggest you to bring in your voice, your story from your very own words, because as I said, SOPs are not meant to be fancy. You don't have to show your vocabulary. You don't have to show anything else apart from the story that makes the connection and the potential that you have. I think you're the best person to write about it. Even though AI can bring out all these fancy stuff, it just cannot replace you. So you are the center of attraction. So just to give a few examples of how one might catch AI, if you were to use ChatGPT, most of the conversations would involve the use of M dashes. That is the long hyphen that you see. So that is a very telltale sign that you have started using AI. The second thing is it starts using certain words. Even though you say avoid jargons, you might be the best prompter that there is on this universe. It will still start putting out certain complex words, which are a telltale sign that it is written by AI. And third, sometimes, there are parsers. That is like just like an ATS. You would also be, there are certain parsers available to check for AI written work. So
Yeah.
I don't know which universities use it, which don't. So why take a chance? Ultimately, the story that AI tells is very imaginative. Sometimes, if you don't read it well enough or if you don't understand it enough, there might be a few points which would probably work against you rather than speak for you. So, considering all these constraints, I would say AI is a good place to start. So, understanding the SOP practices, or probably trying to research about the best SOPs written, you might be able to use AI, but ultimately the draft has to be from you.
Shreyas, so why is it important to tailor your SOP? What else can you do to ensure that you are providing, a unique SOP, something that's really kind of highlighting your unique experience?
Sure. So tailoring your SOP, making it as personalized as possible is pretty much advantageous because you're putting out to the admissions committee members that you have done your homework. So that is a first advantage that you have. So you will know what the university does because in my case, the striking point for me was the presence of this particular professor who was instrumental in getting this course moving in the university for the last 45 years. And that was a very good point for me to find out because of my connection. It was not
Did you
mentioned on the
even
university
mention
website.
that in your SOP that,
Yes,
the
did.
reason why you're choosing the school is because of your professor?
Yes, I did. That was one of the reasons that I stated because I was pretty much fascinated. And
Good.
that was possible because of my connection. So I was pretty much using LinkedIn at that point of time to reach out to people, start speaking to alumni, get their understanding of how the things work. So that proved very advantageous because this point was again brought up in my interview with my course director at the time. So he asked me, like I mentioned this, oh, how did you really do it, or how did you find about this particular professor? Because that speaks that you really are intentional about your work. So you are
Good.
very much focused on going to this university because of these and these things. Because it's a matter of pride for any university to have a professor working that long and for somebody who has been instrumental. And the second thing I found out interestingly about this professor was that he was very much part of the committee that started framing the rules for automobiles in the UK. So that worked. These two stories really connected the bridge for me. So it helps connect the elements of my own goals with that offered by the university. So there is a synergy established already. The members already know that you're very much serious, you have done your homework, and it also shows your excitement, right?
Yeah.
That is what is very much required. Why are you excited to join, in my case, Cranfield? Why not go to US, which is where most people would probably run to, because there was this big cry going on at the time in 2018 about UK's course being 1 year long, not being accepted by many companies. And there was also this disadvantage of me getting just 4 months of post study work visa. So there was not much motivation for students. So this became a good point for me to highlight and say that irrespective of what happens, whether I get my job in the UK or not, I was motivated because of these and these and these reasons. So that is what SOP does for you. It just speaks for you. And it also shows how much of an adjustment that you can make. Because I was posed this direct question. The course director asked me, okay, just offers 4 months of post-study work visa. How confident are you to receive a job offer within those 4 months?
Yeah.
So for me, it was more not just about the job offer, because it was something of a third pointer for me. The first 2 points was to learn from the best and to be assured that the knowledge that comes to me is has gone through the times.
Mm.
So it has been filtered over the period from when the regulations actually came into effect to the current generation of regulations. So for me, these became a good talking points. So rather than just focusing on the job, because I was anyway sure that I had a good offer back home. So that again worked for me to place this on the third point. It might not be the case for every student, but I would just say, focus on why a particular university makes sense to you and how does your potential and your past achievements, your work make sense to the university as well, because it's a synergy. It cannot be a one-way street.
Oh, I
There
love
has to
that
be the
synergy.
connection has to happen from both sides.
Earlier on, you mentioned that you were chatting to people, you were networking. At which point did you start doing that?
I started it just after entering my professional career post my bachelor's,
Okay.
because although people did not take LinkedIn seriously, when I say people, people of my age, so those who are really making an entry, because mine is a core mechanical field. I've never diverted my attention towards the allied fields like software or mechatronics or something else. I was properly in the core mechanical field, and LinkedIn probably was the last place for people to have a look or network. But what I found out was when I started speaking to my peers, I found LinkedIn to be a very good treasure trove of information. I wanted to connect with alumni because most of my peers came into the industry, so they never had any inkling towards doing a master's degree. So I couldn't really speak to them. And my contacts outside of my family were limited at that point of time. So there was no other person, because I'm the first mechanical graduate in my family. Traditionally, we have all been civil engineering graduates. So I did not have any contacts to make within my family circle or the friend circle. So I had to kind of innovate and find new ways of getting information. And I needed it to be free because my salary was just very sparse at the time for any fresh mechanical graduate would understand. So I wanted it for free, and I wanted to do it in a way which made it, stay in the backdrop and not show very glaringly to the people outside. So that is when LinkedIn came into the picture, and I started looking out for alumni, especially from India, because not many opted for a proper mechanical or the proper core fields, because as you said, many were interested in the Cranfield School of Management courses. So you can find plenty of people getting into management, but there were very few who wanted to get into mechanical field or automotive field for the reasons I wanted, because most of them just after mechanical engineering shifted to aerospace, shifted to other allied fields like material sciences and stuff. So people did not want to stay in automotive because they started seeing this as a very niched out domain, which did not have any further scope other than getting into electric vehicle manufacturing at that time. So Yeah, that is how my LinkedIn story started, and I've been there ever since. Although it's been inactive for the last 1 year because I've shifted my focus towards X. But I would say still LinkedIn
Okay.
is going to X Twitter.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, but still, I would say LinkedIn is a good place to meet up with people. Some are going to be very honest. Some might just, shrug off and you might not get a response. But what I would say is don't quit. Keep trying. You will definitely get at least a few handful of people who are going to give you the information you need.
Would you suggest that we include weaknesses or kind of things that we're working on, developmental areas? And if yes, how would we put that in an SOP?
This is very interesting because not many people would be comfortable to share their weakness, especially on a document such as an SOP, because that is going to make or break your entry. So my suggestion would be to tie your weaknesses to particular qualities and achievements. For example, when I wrote my SOP, my particular weakness was I couldn't really get my hands, weld pieces because I was building go-karts. So I was a very poor welding guy. So I did not know how to do. And there was also times where I really faltered on adapting to the CAD designs. So I wouldn't really understand what was going on. So that became a good learning curve for me. So what I did was I tied that to my quality of continuous learning. So I said, I'm not a good manufacturing guy, so that is probably why I would not enter the manufacturing field just yet, because I do not have the training or the knowledge required to excel in that field. But again, this kind of ties to my continuous learning, wherein I'm looking forward to learning about the manufacturing processes, but I wouldn't directly want to get involved. And the second thing is I'm trying to get into classes and learn CAD design or meet professionals who have done this for a particular bit of time. And now you see the story gets tied back to why I want a professor of that caliber to be my teacher, because now I know I can learn from them, I can see him, I can observe him, so make that connection and then get the knowledge I need. My weakness became a talking point. Then I started tying it up to my continuous learning, which then baked it back to the primary objective of selecting the university, which is the professor's involvement in the course. So that is how probably you can come up with something like a weakness, because once I've started coaching, I've replaced the weakness with the word challenge, and I would portray it to be a challenge and then see where I can find my corresponding strength to that challenge. So one more example that I can give is I'm very good at analytics. So give me spreadsheets of data, I can probably analyze it, give you what you want and work wonders with it. But if that all, I'm entering a field where new innovation has to be done. So automotive engineering cannot still say, I'm going to stay with the same thing. So you will have to innovate. So when you're innovating, you will not have prior data to focus on, or you will not have existing data which you can refer, gather some information and start working. So what it does to me is I get stuck in paralysis by analysis because I'm too adept at doing analytical reasoning. So I might get stuck with absence of data. So what is the corresponding strength that I can look at? Probably my skill to work in a team. So how does that make it a strength? When I'm stuck, probably I can go to my team members, ask for their opinion, ask for suggestions. I have a good networking skill on LinkedIn, so probably I can type up a post, see if the professionals can answer, or go approach somebody who is going to lead me to a person or to a solution. So that comes as a strength. So if you know how to balance these things, actually you can convert your weakness as a challenge, find the corresponding strength, and they complement each other very well. So my suggestion, if you can tie up your weakness, well and good. If you can't find a story, like I said, just see it as a challenge, see how you can solve this challenge, and then write that as an opportunity.
So you've written your statement of purpose, you've submitted it to your dream school, and now the school wants to interview you. Talk to us about that. What sort of advice, suggestions do you have for a successful interview? I think, like as an international student, there are so many cultural nuances, especially if you're going to the US or the UK and it's been your very first time leaving your home country. And I know you from India, you potentially may have experienced this coming to the UK. What are some cultural differences that international students should be aware of in these interviews with their university?
You're very spot on to bring this point because cultural awareness, cultural differences make all the difference when you're going for an interview. Because technical stuff, I'm sure you'll be able to handle it based on your prior academic achievements. But what really makes an interview win in your favor is to be very aware of how these cultural differences make way into the interview. So more often than not, you would be given a brief idea about who your interviewer is going to be. At least in my case, I received the email directly from my course director asking to schedule an interview with him. So the first thing I went and saw was where did he belong from? Because when you say international universities, you are most likely to have professors from every part of the world. So you're not really sure of getting somebody native to the place itself. Because at least in my experience, Cranfield had a minority British based professors. I had professors from probably almost all the parts of the world except the English speaking nations. So there were people from, I think, Central Europe, which formed the crux of my professors at least. And the only English professor that I had was the professor I was very much interested in, and that was not the professor who took my interview. Understanding what cultural differences mean to people is very important because especially coming in from India, I'm already exposed to a very diverse culture. That actually proved a way advantages for me, and probably that might still be a difficult task for somebody else. So it's important to confidently highlight it in your achievements as to what you really stand for. Right. So for me, it was all about the learning experience. I placed value on whom I associated with, what kind of professors I wanted, because that generally ties back to my Indian way of education, where the teacher is given all the prominence. You start revering them, you give the next pedestal up as next to your parents. So that was how I was trying to approach this. But probably your professor might not even appreciate it. So, for example, I had the habit of calling any of my teachers either as professor or sir or some form of, a label apart from their names. Here,
Yeah.
I was kind of
That's just out of
uh,
respect. I've been taught the
right.
exact same way.
When I started doing the same thing in my interview, the first statement my course director said, "You calling me sir is very much unappreciated." And I was like taken aback for a minute because it just put me off. I was calling sir out of respect, and he said, "No, sir is something which is reserved for somebody with accomplishments." And for him personally, it meant slave I remain, which I was not aware of. I never even looked at it from that part, but he said,
Yeah.
"So please don't call. So you can call me directly by my name." And that is how the references go. So that was my very
Oh,
first
interesting.
introduction to cultural shock. So people wanted, or the professors wanted the students to address them by their name. If they have completed their PhD, perhaps they would entertain the term doctor. But apart from that, they would never want them to be addressed as sirs or ma'ams or whatever. And the second thing is that is the level of formality. So here it is coming from respect, but for them it is sense of achievement. And it is also very important to research what probably their host country stands for. So my professor was from Spain. So they had this pretty much a big difference between the Catalonia and the original Spanish people, some internal tensions going on. So I just made it a point to stay away from any politically motivated messages, just so that I wouldn't antagonize him any further. Not that I was interested in politics or I wanted to bring that topic up. It was just my way of preparing myself to not be anywhere in the vicinity of that particular topic. And the third thing is to understand the levels of English that you might be exposed to. At least in India, I'm sure most students would be very proficient in English. But when you start interacting with people from non-native English speakers, like say Central Europe or probably sometimes towards the Middle East. So you should be really careful in how you speak,
Yeah.
perhaps the speed, the tone, because here if you start speaking slightly louder, it is considered to be disrespectful in India.
True.
Whereas when you're doing a video conference, you have no idea how loud you're going to sound. So it's always better to just ask, am I loud enough for you? Is there anything that I can do to just make myself sound better? So
Yeah.
always start asking questions, so they will be definitely appreciated. And you're most likely to be told to either reduce your volume, which we also probably did before we started the podcast. So it's just a good way of acknowledging their presence and making it a good piece of icebreaker, I would say. If you don't know what to talk, or if you can't make small talk, I think this would be a good way to just break the ice, sound comfortable, and probably get the interview going. And the final thing that you need to remember is you cannot always understand all the cultural differences because there are too many, and probably you're not going to be exposed to all of them. And
Yeah.
sometimes, we stay in the modern time. So people will definitely be understanding of where you're coming from. So you need not have to really stress, on these points, but it is always good to just have them on the back of your mind so that you just come forward as polite, as a person who can be interactive and engaging.
Reminds me of this book that I read called The Culture Map. And they talk about just kind of all the different cultural nuances and in each country. What are some of the common questions that get asked in these interviews, and how can international students prepare?
Absolutely. So this is something which I get most of my coaches to prepare ahead of time. Because one, you don't want to be sounding robotic. You don't want to be reading from some script or some notes that you have scribbled. It is okay to do so, but I would say these are some basic questions for which you need to know the answer from within rather than, asking some GPT or AI to write them for you. So the first few questions that usually get asked is the classic, tell me about yourself. Yeah. Right. So this is going to be tricky to so many different students, mainly because when a person asks to tell about yourself, one, you might not be comfortable to just talk about your achievements, or two, you don't have a proper structure that you follow to answer this question. So tell me about yourself. They are all just looking for your name because they want to understand how you pronounce it, then where you're based from because they want to understand the demographics, and what are your brief achievements. That is it. So they don't want you to go in depth or start talking about what you did, what you didn't do. It doesn't make any sense. It's irrelevant. All they need for you to answer when they say, tell me about yourself, is to just give a brief 1 minute answer, which says your name perfectly, your place of residence or where you're based at, and a brief about what you want to achieve from what you have achieved or what you want, what you expect from this interview. That is it. Second, the question that you should be very well prepared because you would have already written it in the SOP. Why do you want to enroll for this program and why this particular university? So again, they're not looking for you to explain in detail. They just want to understand if you can make the connect between the story you told in the SOP and the story you're going to tell now. So they just want to make the relation. So you just have to highlight 2 or 3 things that you wrote in your SOP and just say that you're very much interested, excited, or looking forward to doing this program. So you don't have to really go beyond and start making this too boring for the interview, because now you have to remember the interview is going to be technical. It's not some storytelling activity or it's not some, casual conversation. This is going to be very professional. So you would be expected to stay professional and to the point. And the third question would be, which you already pointed out, what are your strengths and weaknesses? So here again, they're not looking to evaluate you, to
Challenges.
judge you. Yes. So it is only their way of understanding if you're met with a challenge, because master's is going to be a professional degree with not much input from the teacher. So they just want to evaluate how are you going to perform when the input is minimal. Are you self-motivated? How can you really use your strengths? So this is a very good question to showcase how you can convert your weaknesses to challenges and challenges to opportunities. So that is what they want to check. They want to just ensure that you're fit. Once you finish the course, you're going to be employed if it works in the country, or if not, go back to your home place and you're able to get the job. And lastly, it is very evident that you're going to be questioned about your technical skills. So, for example, in my interview, I was just asked about a few equations, how I understood physics. And again, they're not going to check your theory-based answers. All they want to ensure is that you have the right structure. So I would say the best way to answer would be to use the STAR method, which is the
Hmm.
situation, task, action, and result. So have some compelling examples that you might have had from your academic experience. So for me, the go-karting experience worked well to give a good response as to show him the structure that I followed, the design principles I used, and how I brought about the results that were required of us. Again, the one final tip that I would say is to tie your answers back to how you can add value to the university as well as to the program, because that is where they are going to place the maximum emphasis on. So you will
Hmm.
have to tie back all the things back to the story. And this is why I say when you write an SOP, have some compelling examples, show it and tie it back to the original point, because this is going to definitely be placed in the interview before they get into the technical questions. And most students who don't get an offer lose it out at this point itself. So even though they are technically very adept, they understand each and everything. If they cannot portray or answer it to the point, they're going to lose it out.
And I know it's quite different to what we've been talking about, but it's almost like, the beginning of your study abroad journey and now the end. You've graduated, you've really gone through the entire experience, and now you are looking for a job. And I believe, you're a coach and you're well versed on this topic. So if you could just switch it up a little bit and give us some advice on resume essentials. Are there different rules in different countries about the resume, when you're busy creating the resume?
Absolutely. So resume expectations vary by country. So I'm sure our listeners would be able to differentiate between the varieties that are accepted in the US to what is accepted in the European countries and probably further east in Australia. And what I suggest to every candidate is to ensure that all your resumes are readable by the ATS software. So by general rule of thumb, I just ask candidates not to include their photo, not to include their age, not to include their marital status, because nowadays it is immaterial and
Yeah.
photos and other stuff are usually not readable by the ATS and it just sends your resume out. The second thing is it should be really concise. So please keep the resume to a maximum of 1 page. Especially if you're going into your master's degree, I'm sure you wouldn't have so much experience to talk about. Even though you're coming in with a 5-year industry experience and then doing your master's, I would still suggest to only include those pointers that are very relevant to the application you're submitting to. So, for example, I had already done 1 year of industry training. I had done 4 internships, so that itself would take 1 page. But I decided to eliminate 3 of my internships and just add my professional experience because it was very relevant, and one internship which suggested why I would be a good fit, and then brought it down to 1 page. So that is usually one of the mistakes that new entrants or prospective college university seekers do. So keep it to 1 page. And second is to make the data as precise as possible. So don't just give generic data, which again ties back to my SOP tips. If you say, for example, I have improved, if I were to give a tech job, for example, so website. So if you say I've improved the SEO on this particular website, that is very generic. People would not understand what you have done. The best way to articulate this would be I have improved these so and so SEO metrics for so and so website, which resulted in so and so result. So,
Yeah.
for example, if you're doing more backlinks, probably Google domain authority would be something which you have improved on. Or, for example, you would have added more keywords, which would have got more hits for the
Mm.
website, or if you have streamlined certain procedures, which makes the website loading speed better. So, always have statistics. So, if you have improved your website loading speed, suggest what is the improvement, how did you do it, and make it in one sentence. It need not be a paragraph. So, the statements have to be very concise and should carry data. The third thing is please do this. Research the keywords for the job description provided, because most prospective candidates, just skip this method and just, try to randomly write resumes. It doesn't work because most often ATS will just simply pass it off as immaterial, even though you have the experience because you didn't find the keywords. And that is how you gain the first entry. Even if you're going through a recruiter, for them to be able to see your CV, you need to have those keywords present. Please distribute the keywords across the resume. Yeah. And you need to distribute it. So it doesn't make sense for you to just include the keywords in your probably the objective and then leave the rest of the content generic. Again, as I said, everything has to tie up to whatever you have written. For example, in SOP, we said it has to tie up to your motivation. In resume, it has to tie up to your objective. So whatever objective that you have stated, make sure all your points speak to the objective in one or the other manner. And I don't say each and every point should speak to that. If you're writing an experience, probably 2 to 3 points in that experience, if it can tie it up back to the objective, that makes it much more better. And please avoid jargons, because some people are technical recruiters, some are just, on a part-time basis, they are hired just to do the job. So it is better to avoid jargons. I understand you might be very much motivated to use it because you want to show your technical expertise. But again, as with your university interviews, there will come a point where you can showcase your technical expertise. Here, what people really want to see is your experience. Is it apt? The keywords that you have used, because that shows you have done your homework and understand about the company and the job description before writing the resume. So these are some effective tips that anybody can follow, irrespective of where they are in their career progression, because these are some basic points that you need to be wary of before you start crafting the resume and then sending it out. Because today, again, as you mentioned, AI is always present. So don't just rely entirely on AI, because ATS can really understand AI written stuff, even though you might be able to get past. Sometimes I would just say be very careful how much of AI you use, and don't make it an habit of getting all your drafts first written by AI, because that just doesn't make it any better. So write your drafts first, put that to ChatGPT or AI, ask for it to rate it and suggest improvements. Use it for keyword search, keyword research, and also use it for researching about the companies, and then make your resume tailored. So each job that you apply needs to have a tailored resume. This is something which is very critical and very much needed to be done.
Shreyas, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm absolutely sure that our listeners found this extremely insightful and useful. I know I did. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning into this episode of the International Student Podcast by Prodigy Finance.